stacks of wood to spread the load across the sill. The bumper's super stressed. That used to be a 14mm nut. Everything has to come out.
Like that?
Red hot.
New bolt in place.
And a puck on the top.
Hi everyone, welcome to the body lift video for the 100 series. Filmed over the course of nearly 2 years. You're about to see me go through probably 9 different outfit changes. Beard, no beard, hair, no hair, well mostly no hair. And no less than 3 Land Cruisers involved in the filming of this. And thanks everyone for the comments and suggestions. In fact, this one is because David on Instagram asked me for some advice on body lift, and I thought, hey, I've got like 9 hours worth of footage that I can edit together. So here's everything that I learned from doing a body lift on my Land Cruiser 100 series. Hope you enjoy. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Land Cruiser Scotland, and welcome back to my mall crawler, which is lifted. I don't take it off-road, but I wanted to fit 35s with minimal cutting. I did a bit on the front. It has a 1-inch suspension lift and a 1-inch body lift. I found it really difficult to find good information online about how to do it and the problems and challenges that I would face. Body lifts are not well covered on YouTube for this vehicle, so I'm going to do a complete video, a detailed video on all the steps that I took in order to lift this thing in my spare time.
I'm fortunate enough to have one good Land Cruiser and one totally learner project, which is being scrapped. But I bought a bunch of parts for the dead one, including a body lift kit from New Zealand and a full set of replacement body mounts, along with brand new bolts and all the fitting that I need to do it. So for this, the good Land Cruiser, I'm going to lift the body, do the body mount bushes and install the 1-inch lift kit. I'm going to figure out how using the practice Land Cruiser.
Well, let me kick you off with a summary of the steps that you'll need to go through. Starting off with ripping out all your interior. First, strip the interior, get the seats out, get the carpets peeled back. Then you're going to have 12 bolts that you need to loosen. 2 underneath the headlight, 2 at the front feet, 2 beneath the front seats, 2 at the back seats, 2 at the rear bumper, and then an extra 2 just above the rear wheel. 12 bolts in total. The 17mm nut at the top will not move. It's got a tab that locks it in place, but underneath you'll have a 14mm bolt, and that's what you loosen off. You will have to check and release any connections between the body and the frame, like the steering yoke, wheel arch trims, any AHC wiring, airbox piping, intercooler piping. I'll show you that later. You need to jack the body up 2 or 3 inches on the side that you're going to remove first. Loosen all the bolts and then jack up one side 2 or 3 inches, making sure you don't bust any cables or pipes. At that point you can renew the body mounts if you want to. I certainly did, since I was in there anyway. You insert your puck and the new nut and bolt, tighten that down, but not fully. Then you jack up the other side of the car, repeat the process, 17mm on the top, 14mm on the bottom, insert a puck, replace the bolt, and then you can bring everything down flat and level. Once you've repeated both sides, you can torque everything up to spec, and then reassemble everything that you moved in the interior.
There's the top half of the body mount. There is a rubber section and there's a steel shaft up the middle. So you take the top and bottom rubbers off and keep the steel shaft and assemble that together with your new pieces. Bottom puck is the smaller one, top puck with the metal shaft from the existing fitting, and you fit them together thusly. Your body mount puck goes on the top, and then you drop your bolt, you get a new bolt down through the whole lot and tighten it up.
Now let me jump to a completely different Land Cruiser and show you where all the bolts are.
Basically, everything has to come out in order to get at the mount positions. The first 2 body lift mounts are down in the corner here, so you have to take out your drawers and your carpets and your back seats, and then the side trims and the sort of filler strip that goes in here. All that has to come out so that you can get at the 17mm head that's in there. There's a 17mm bolt. On the other Land Cruiser, so the braking Land Cruiser, I couldn't get either of those 17s to come off, and I had to just angle grinder through it. Hopefully it won't come to it, but I do have spare bolts if necessary. There's one underneath the rear seats, one underneath the front seats, and one underneath the front feet, and last there's one underneath the headlight basically, so you probably got to remove the headlight to get to that one. If I examine one of my many... Well, these bolts came off the dead Land Cruiser. I was making a mistake here because the top nut is a 17mm and the bottom is a 14. However, all of the top ones, they are fused. I don't know if they're welded or what, but that 17mm rotates with this tab, so you cannot turn the top bolt. You have to release the 14mm at the bottom, and unfortunately those are the ones that tend to be rusted. So don't bother with the top. It's going to hold still with the tab there. Just get the 14mm off the bottom and hope that it isn't rusted to oblivion. Here's one of the mounts. Just move my torch a little. Each of them have this little plastic cover. I wonder if they're the same shape. Yeah, those look like the same covers. That's good. They're interchangeable, which means I can store them over here rather than storing them in the car. But each one of these 17mm bolts on the top, they're all tabbed. So if you see here, it's got a little protrusion like a shark fin. That means that this can't wind off. It can't turn left to loosen, which means the only way to release it is by using the 14mm nut underneath the body. So let me just get a quick look under there. That used to be a 14mm nut. That is how I have to get this body mount off. And notably, the mount that people forget, the one that upsets folks, is right here and here, behind the rear seats. There's a little mount, which is a peculiar one. It's like a round fitting. Right. These little boils are 14mm, and they're never tight. Seems completely overkill, but we just have to remove those, because once you've lifted the car, this wide sort of washer or bolt head thing, it will rub against, it rubs against the steel down there. Pop your little cover back on once you're done. Don't need to worry about that one anymore. Can throw that away. One more. Dead easy. Throw that away and pop the cover back on.
One of the things I cannot recommend enough is doing the body mounts while you're in there. It's not that expensive. It was 132, I think, euros. I'll get the receipt. I think it was 130 euros for a full set of mounts from Fabest, and it was nearly effortless once I was in there anyway, cutting off bolts and stuff to pop in a new body mount.
Right, well, here is the full kit from Fabest for doing your body mounts. Some of them are fitted in pairs, like this part number here, 100 and 101. That's a top and a bottom for body mounts, and other ones are like the body mount that goes underneath the driver's feet there. So that's the first one. So at least there's not a top and bottom to it. I just need to get the old bolt out. Looks like there'll be 2 bolts either side. Get them off somehow. Lift this out. Slot the other one back in. Hopefully I won't have to do too much raising of the body to get this out, because otherwise it can then start stretching cables and things. So new body mount in, then the lift pucks get squeezed in on top. These new bolts don't have the little tab that stops them from spinning, so we'll need to be able to get top and bottom in order to tighten them up. And there's the pucks. I should probably open this kit now. This is the kit. It is from Flat Out Off-Road in New Zealand. So I had to get this shipped over there. It took some time, but came with bolts, pucks. I think these are aluminium. They're so light, they might be made of vibranium. I'm not sure. 10 of those, and new body mounts to go with them. So once the old nut and bolt comes out, body mount, puck on the top, new bolt, down through the whole lot, because I don't think the existing ones are long enough. Tighten everything up.
So here's one here with my new bolt in place and the puck on top.
But you just have to do one side at a time, because if the body shifts on the frame, you just get all kinds of nightmares. Keep one row of bolts in place but loosened, and you do the other side. You jack up one side and swap everything, and then repeat. Fortunately, we've got a lift, but that Land Cruiser has to go away over there, so we're probably just going to quickly cut the body off that and store it over there and wheel the good Land Cruiser on so that we can get started. any more underneath that. But this is everything that we have. Body lift kit, whole new set of body mounts, whole new set of bolts.
Let's get started with one side of the body lift.
Each one of these body mounts is a 17mm at the top and a 14mm at the bottom. So I've just paint marked them so that we can judge when they're moving, because some of these might be dead. But before we do any of them, because we have it, we're going to use an induction heater here. And
the paint marks off, boss.
Just give that bolt a heat and then go around them all and come back and do this one first. Smell that delicious underseal.
Like that?
Red hot. Wow.
As you say,
Free the seas.
free the seas.
Now when you do this, you have to jack up one side of the vehicle. Although you're only doing a 1-inch lift, the side that you're working on needs to be lifted by, I would say, 2 to 3 inches. So if you have a look there, that's probably about a 3-inch raise presently. And that's so that you can get in to where the body mounts are, because you need to be able to get up above it, pull the bolts out, pull the old rubbers out. So you need a bit of working area. Now, the parts that will stretch, we stopped lifting when we heard the bumper brackets starting to creak. So that bumper is at its limit there. You can see actually the paint is cracking a little bit here where the bumper's super stressed. And the other part that will be your limiting factor is this intercooler piping. If you're on the diesel, that has 2 12mm bolts. One of them is really difficult to reach at the back here. Actually, there is a pretty decent view of one of the body mounts. That doesn't have a puck in yet, but that's one of the body mounts that we're swapping, and so the intercooler pipes really stress it. I've also disconnected the plastic wheel arch guards at the bottom. I did the bottom because the top had more studs to remove. And lastly, a point of stress will be these cable connectors here, just in the center of the screen, here and here. That's a height level sensor and the ABS sensor. Those wires are really, really tight. So you need to make sure that you disconnect them. Here it is here, the height sensor wire, that's one of them, and the ABS wire is the other. Rather than unfastening it from here, I just unplugged the loom, and that gives it a bit of slack again. But when you're jacking it up to work on it, the limit will be the flex in the front bumper and those ABS wires. There's some on the other side as well. In terms of getting the front body mounts, it was easy to just pop off the headlights, and that gave us the access we need because the bolts are in front of the radiator panel. So to get at them, you really need the headlights out, because there is no locking tab on the front, so those will just spin forever. You do need to get a 17mm on the top to stop it from spinning. But this side is done. The new mounts are in place, new body mount rubbers and a puck on the top. Again here, there's the new one. Top and bottom body mount rubber, and then the puck on the top of it with the new nut and bolt.
A few minutes later.
Right, here's the progress update on this body lift. All 5 mounts on this side are wound off so that they're on right at the end of the thread. On this side, the nuts are stripped off completely. Here is one of the mount positions. I'm just going to take off the old, this is the top half of the front mount. So we've got, going on, we will have a top mount with a metal face. The puck goes on top of that, and that goes into the gap that I just had my hand in, but we'll have to jack the car a little bit more because it's much taller. And then underneath the car there will be a rubber side which sockets onto what we just had, and the metal part underneath it then is fastened up with a washer and a bolt. But first we're going to jack this side of the car a bit more, and we're doing that with our ramps but using stacks of wood to spread the load across the sill. So we're going to put a bit more height on this left side. But before I do that, I'm just going to have a little inspection, make sure that none of my hydraulic lines or brake pipes or anything like that are stretching too much. These ones all look fine. So we'll give it a bit more height. Here's a set of old mounts and new ones. Now, in terms of the flexibility, they are pretty much the same. Maybe the old ones are a little bit more flexible, but the real difference, look at the size difference between the old one and the new one. And again, old one and the new one. This poor thing has been squished. 20 years worth of squish.
There are a few places which are going to be tight as a result of your body lift. One of them is here, where there's a vertical air intake pipe.
Your air box is mounted to the body, and the inlet is mounted to the engine, which sits in the frame.
This has to be really tightly secured because there's a little bit of stretch in that rubber corrugated pipe that goes up and down, but that's going to be stretched really tight as a result of your body lift.
So we just got one of us to pull this rubber pipe up, while the other one hit the Jubilee clip nice and tight. So you can see there's a little gap there. If that starts to slip off, I'll just get a longer universal silicone.
Here on the side there's a relay, next to this intake heater relay. These are sensor cables for the hydraulic suspension and I think the ABS, but you can see I've actually removed them from the mount so they've got a bit of slack. They're no longer screwed into the body here, they've got just enough slack so they can move around. The steering linkage is an obvious one. It's tricky to see from here. There's my steering linkage where you can see I've welded two yokes together in order to lengthen it and get more spline engagement. The other part is the brake pipes. They're beginning to rust now. Those brake pipes, and in fact the hydraulic suspension pipes, the coils there allow a bit of flex, but they will stretch. Just make sure you don't break them when you do the body lift. Bit of a peculiar one here is this pipe here, or two pipes I should say. That's the pipe that supplies the intercooler on the front of the car. I don't actually have that connected anymore. It's held on with the various Jubilee clips and connectors, but it used to attach to the frame at the bottom and the body at the top. That just is free moving now because it just get really stretched and the plastic was cracking anyway. Another piece that's going to have to go, these engine covers. See, I've removed some of them already and I've got a new set to go on once I've done my undersealing job. These are useless because they can't attach to the bottom at the frame and the top at the bonnet, at the body. All these little holes no longer line up. Fortunately, I got a set from Rad Rubber Designs, sent over from the USA. I'm going to fit them once I've done the rest of my undersealing. And just be aware, when you're jacking up one side so that you've got some space to work, one of the tightest connectors you'll find is the ABS wiring. Well, I should say ABS wiring and the active hydraulic suspension wiring. These wires for brakes and the HC, these get super tight when you lift one half of the car in order to get into your body lift. So just keep an eye on those when you're jacking up that one side. You know, you're going to lift one side 2 or 3 inches to give yourself some space to work. Really pay close attention to those cables because those stretched an awful lot when you lift one half of the car in order to renew this side, and then vice versa on the other side. When you jack that half, it's the wiring for the hydraulic sensors and the ABS that you need to watch out for.
And here on the diesel, I think that's the supply pipe. It's either supply pipe or the return pipe, not sure which, but that pipe will now rub on this unit, which I think is the swirl control ECU. Diesel spill valve control. Anyway, that ECU, it now rubs on the corner of that pipe, so you either get a longer pipe and reroute it, or just put a sleeve on it so that it doesn't eventually rub through.
I really think you should modify the steering linkage. There just isn't enough spline engagement to be safe.
So you can see here right in the centre of the screen we've got 2 bolts. Those go through that little collar thing. Now they're normally seized absolutely solid, so I've been soaking these in penetrating oil because before you start lifting you need to release both sides of that sleeve so that the steering column can slide backwards into the vehicle to account for the new height, and then you just cinch everything up tight. With 1 inch lift, people have said that you don't need a steering extension, but you really do. So that gap here, which I'll probably have to draw a picture over it, is all empty space of spline. So we've got the bottom steering tube, steering spline, is only just past the bolt position, and then they've got a long ass gap, and then at the top here we've got part of a spare yoke welded on, and only the top has spline engagement. So if you're going to do this, expect to need a steering tube extension, but the one that we bought was dog shit. This is the steering extension, which flat out supplies. Now it cost me about an extra £150 for this. It's just a piece of machine steel. Now I thought that this would just go onto the top of the steering arm, where you can see and access, but it does not fit there. You have to put it on the very bottom of the steering rack. So to put it on the bottom of the steering rack, you have to strip off an enormous amount at the bottom of the engine. You have to get the wheels off, you have to remove the bolts for the engine mounts, you have to lift the engine up in order to get access to put this in. So I can only say that this is practical if you're putting in an entire new steering rack, and you can just pop this on the rack before it goes onto the link rod. What I did was just get a couple of these from Toyota, and then you can weld them together into one extra long steering extension tube. Toyota call this a yoke, and you can just pop this on the end once you've got one that's double length, and that gives you more than enough spline engagement. Some people have said that you don't need this at all, and there's enough spline engagement just in the one yoke. I disagree. I just do not think it's safe enough, because when I did it, I only had about a quarter of the yoke filled with spline engagement until I did the double-ended one. So I would say just get this from Toyota. It's like 20 quid, and you can actually access the area in order to fit it. You just slide it up and down the steering tube rather than removing so much in order to get this on the bottom directly fitted onto the rack.
Look at that. That nice little weld.
You are going to have to cut the radiator shroud or relocate the radiator to a different position. I just went for cutting the shroud with the Dremel. It was a far easier approach. For me, relocating this bracket was just a total no-go. There's not a lot of access here, and it's the sort of fabrication that I'm just not capable of. So just taking a Dremel to the bottom of the shroud is a far easier solution for me.
Well, right now I'm under the radiator. You can see the main crank there, all the pulleys on that. And the bottom of this radiator shroud, when you do the lift, the tips of these fan blades, oh sorry, there's so many things in the way. The tips of these fan blades will strike the bottom of the shroud. So you can see I've done a bit of a notch there. I'm going to try and trim this out so that it is less likely to rub. Now, it's really difficult to see, but there's probably an inch of clearance there anyway. So this is probably going to be fine, but just as a bit of a security, I'm going to cut it, and then I don't have to worry about it. Radiator shroud trimming. What fun. Oh, and I'm using a Dremel because that's what I have to hand. A hot plastic cutting knife would be much better. So the only thing I would suggest is while you're in here, whatever you're using, for the love of God, don't cut aircon hoses, power steering hoses, intercooler piping. Just be really careful when you're moving your tools up and down. I'm so close to touching these oil hoses that I've just unclipped it from the bracket here, and I've put a little reusable cable tie to get it out of the way. I really don't want to cut that. If I could move that one, that's a power steering cooler hose. I mean, if I could move it, I would, but it's solid fitting. So again, just be careful, don't cut your hoses. I had to keep cutting more and more because after I took an inch out of the centre, I just adjusted the blade to the centre position and I made sure I had an inch of clearance. But then up the sides I still had a few places where I didn't yet have an inch. You can see I've cleared out a bit more to give me an inch of clearance there as well. So it's pretty tight. I mean, you could maybe even just take the whole bottom of the shroud off, but I'll try to keep it mostly intact. Anyway, the Dremel did work, but I needed to use I don't know what tip you call that, a burr tip maybe? But that's what I used so I could draw the shape that I needed because the little cutting discs weren't working. Well, I'm now covered in an utter hail of plastic shreds.
Now eventually I did have to make some adjustments to my front bumper since I had it off anyway. But in the back there, you can just see, it's pretty dark, but where the bumper mounts to, there's a metal frame here. I cut and relocated those mounts because you can see there's just a little bit of sag on the front of the bumper. That was atrocious when I first did the body lift.
I've taken this front crash bar off and I need to relocate my bumper mounts because the bumper's too stretched and it looks a bit saggy and sad. So my plan here is, with the angle grinder, cut off the bumper mounts, move them up 1 inch or whatever is appropriate depending on the mount. Like these end ones are curved, so the plane is curved, so I can't just simply move that up 1 inch because that's also moving it like down and back, so I might stretch it more. So for this one, maybe I only lift it 1/2 inch up, but that will reduce the amount of stretch that's on the bumper.
The back one, which I haven't modified yet, because basically I don't know how I'm going to. You can see that the back bumper has sagged down because the fixings on the bottom, there's one, they stretch the bumper into place, and I haven't quite figured out how to get around that yet. So for the moment, my bumper has, 1 inch and a bit gap. I'm living with it, it's not causing me a problem. That front bumper modification also required my first ever welding. It was functional, but the quality was appalling.
The last point I'll make is about this in-tank, I don't even think it's not a pump, it's just pure vacuum that runs on. But the inside of it is absolutely disgusting. So that's about 20 years worth of muck, and it comes off, I mean my hands are dirty already, but if I wipe it, it actually comes off black like oil. So if you've come this far, or if you've got your carpets up or something, it's probably worth swapping one of these while you're in there. And that's what I'm going to do, not on this old heap of junk, but on the good Land Cruiser. If your carpets are up anyway, it's probably a 5-minute job to swap it. So that's the last thing I would say. This little sock filter thing is absolutely boggin', as we would say in Scotland. So get that swapped. There is the finished article. 1 inch body lift on top of around 1 inch of height sensor lift. I had to bring it down because the pressures were too high. The only downside I see here is that the back bumper has a sag at the back. It's a bit worse on that side. So I didn't unscrew the back bumpers, that's just the stretch that it has on it. But at least from head on, very little difference in terms of a gap. A lot of work, very involved. Pulling out the entire interior and the carpets and all the rest is very difficult. If you don't have ramps, I don't recommend doing this on your driveway. You have to lift the car quite a lot on one side in order to get access to change body mounts. If you were just doing the pucks, that's fine, but I figured while I was in there I would do a full set of body mounts. The only body mount I didn't change was right at the back of the car here. It was so rusted. Under here, this section, to get the bolts off, these are a 14mm head, but they're so rusty because this is a very rusty part of the car generally. But these are seized in, the tops are no longer 14s, but fundamentally you can't get into it. You can't get a socket in the top, you can't get a spanner because it's contained within this box here, so you can't spanner it. I have no idea what the protocol is here to change this rearmost body mount. But we've got a little bit of gap there now. You can see some wiring and such. And at the front, these little plastic covers have moved. Don't think I could get them to join in again. Maybe I'll cable tie them instead, just so they're still kind of functional. Now I'll be able to fit those 35s, and I'm expecting not to have any rubbing. But that is it. 1 inch body lift, 1 inch sensor lift, ready for our 35-inch tyres. If you have any questions, I know this has been a long video for this body lift one. If you have any questions, there's lots to learn and not enough information on the internet, so please forgive the longer than normal video. I hope it's been helpful, and if you think of anything else that we've missed, please do ask some questions, and I'll give you what knowledge that I do have. Right, look after yourselves, make good decisions, and maybe I'll see you in another video. Take care. Thank you.